It was one of those icy nights where even the moonlight looked frozen. Garrett Monroe stepped out of his polished SUV and adjusted the collar of his coat as a sharp wind sliced down the quiet downtown street. He had just returned from a luxury fundraising event uptown, a gala filled with glittering gowns, hollow conversations, and champagne that flowed more easily than compassion. As he approached the front entrance of his high-rise building, something off in the shadows caught his eye. A slumped shape lay near the edge of the alleyway beside the complex. At first, he thought it was a pile of discarded clothes or an old tarp. But as he stepped closer, recognition struck him like a punch. "Aaron," he said aloud, voice low but stunned. The woman stirred, eyes fluttering open. Even in the dim streetlight, he could see it was her, Erin Caldwell, the soft-spoken, hard-working woman who had been cleaning his apartment twice a week for over a year. She looked disoriented, embarrassed, and cold. She pulled her threadbare coat tighter as she sat up, revealing a small backpack she'd been clutching like a lifeline. "Mr. Monroe," she whispered, voice cracking. I didn't mean for you to see me like this. What are you doing here?" "Out here on the street." She stood quickly, swaying slightly. "I was just resting. I'll be gone before anyone notices." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Are you homeless?" Her face flushed. "It's temporary. The shelter was full tonight. I just needed a place to sit. I didn't want to cause any trouble." Garrett stared at her, words caught in his throat. He had always known Erin as reliable, punctual, and respectful. She was one of those people who blended into the background, never complained, never asked for more, never let anyone see her pain. And yet here she was, sleeping in the freezing cold just feet away from the building where she worked. "How long has this been going on?" he asked quietly. She hesitated. "Since March. I've been bouncing between shelters, buses, church basements, wherever I can. I just needed to keep the job. I didn't want to lose it too." Garrett's stomach twisted. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. He lived in a penthouse with heated floors and panoramic views of the skyline, and the person who cleaned it had no roof over her head. "You're coming upstairs," he said firmly. "No. Please, Mr. Monroe. I don't want to break any boundaries. I'll be fine. I'm not asking. You're coming inside, now." She didn't fight him again. He picked up her backpack, it was shockingly light, and led her into the building. The security guard at the front desk glanced up curiously, but Garrett said nothing. In the elevator, Erin stood quietly in the corner, eyes cast down, while Garrett's mind reeled with 1,000 thoughts. When they arrived at the penthouse, he brought her a blanket and offered her the guest room. She paused at the door like she was afraid to enter, but he gently waved her in. "You'll be safe here tonight." He didn't sleep much. Instead, he sat by the window in the living room, staring out at the city lights. He thought about how many times Erin had quietly dusted the frames on his wall or folded his towels with perfect corners, never giving any hint that her world outside was falling apart. How many others like her walked through life invisible? Garrett thought of his mother, who had worked 3 jobs to keep him and his siblings fed while his father struggled with addiction. They didn't have money back then, but they had dignity, and they had each other. He'd always told himself he'd never forget where he came from. But maybe he had. The next morning, Erin was up before him, quietly loading the dishwasher. As if the night before had never happened. "You don't have to do that," he said, rubbing his eyes. "I didn't want to overstay my welcome." "You didn't. You never will." She smiled politely but didn't argue. He sat down at the kitchen island. "I want you to tell me everything. The whole story. Please." And so she did. Hesitantly at first, but once she started, the floodgates opened. She told him about her mother, who'd passed from heart failure last year. How she had to leave her full-time job at the nursing facility to care for her during hospice. She told him about the mounting bills, the eviction, the nights spent on buses because they ran late and were warm. And how, through it all, she held on to this job as her last lifeline. "I didn't want to burden anyone," she said softly. "If I could just keep working, maybe I could get back on track. I didn't want anyone's pity." "It's not pity," Garrett said. "It's humanity." He meant it. There was something about Erin's quiet strength that deeply moved him. She had endured more than most could imagine, and yet, every Tuesday and Friday, she showed up to clean his apartment like everything was fine. "I want to help," he said. She shook her head quickly. "No, please. You've already done enough. One night is more than I ever expected." He looked her in the eye. "You've shown up for me for over a year, Erin. Let me show up for you now." That day, he canceled all his meetings. He took her to breakfast at a small diner 2 blocks away, her choice. Over pancakes and coffee, he learned more about her than he had in 12 months of passing greetings. She had once studied elementary education. She loved crossword puzzles. Her dream was to open a small tutoring center for underprivileged kids, if life had gone a different way. After they returned, Garrett disappeared into his home office and made a series of calls, long ones. Erin didn't ask questions. She resumed her usual work, but something felt different. There was no longer a wall between employer and employee, something warmer had settled between them. Mutual respect. A bond of quiet understanding. Later that week, Garrett asked her to sit down. He had something to show her. "Erin," he said, setting a folder on the table. "I made some calls. I hope you'll hear me out." Erin looked at the folder on the table, her hands still damp from washing a glass. She dried them on a dish towel, unsure if she should sit or run. Her heart was pounding. People like her didn't get offered folders. Not from people like him. Garrett pushed it gently toward her. "Go ahead. Open it." With hesitant fingers, she flipped it open. Inside were a few neatly clipped documents, an apartment application, a rental agreement, and a check. "I reached out to a landlord I know," Garrett said softly. "It's a studio apartment in Westover, quiet neighborhood, close to the bus line. I've already paid first and last month's rent. All you have to do is move in." She stared at the papers, then at him. "You, what? It's not charity, Erin. You've earned this 10 times over. It's just a reset. A place to start." Tears brimmed in her eyes before she could stop them. She blinked quickly, trying to keep them from falling. "Why would you do this for me?" Garrett leaned back, his voice steady but kind. "Because I was raised to believe that if you're blessed with more than you need, you build a longer table, not a higher fence. And because I've been walking past people like you my whole life, not seeing them. That ends now." Erin wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweatshirt, silent for a long moment. "I don't know what to say." "Just say yes," he said with a small smile. She nodded slowly, clutching the folder like it was made of gold. "Yes. Yes, thank you." That weekend, Garrett helped her move. He insisted on driving the moving van himself, even though all she had were a few bags and some donated furniture he'd quietly arranged to have waiting in the apartment. He even brought over a housewarming basket, towels, a rice cooker, some books, and a framed print that said, "One step at a time." Erin stood in the center of the tiny living room, sunlight pouring through the windows, and took a deep breath. "It's not much," Garrett said, placing the last box down. "But it's yours." She turned to him with a look he would never forget. Not just gratitude, but relief. Hope. The kind of emotion you only see when someone has been holding their breath for too long. "It's everything," she said. Over the next few weeks, Erin began to rebuild. She still worked for Garrett, but now there was a warmth in the way they spoke to each other. She began arriving with a lightness in her step, wearing small changes that spoke volumes, cleaner clothes, new shoes, and eventually, a spark in her eyes. Garrett noticed, but he never mentioned it. Instead, he gave her space to grow. One afternoon, Erin brought him a box of cookies she had baked herself. "Just a thank you," she said shyly. He smiled. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." He paused. "Have you ever thought about finishing your teaching degree?" She looked surprised. "Sometimes. But college is a stretch. And I don't even know if I still have what it takes." "Well," he said, handing her a folder, another one, this time navy blue. "You've got a scholarship application in there. For adult learners. I spoke to someone at the community college downtown." Erin sat down slowly, speechless. "I can't make the road easy," he said, "but I can help make sure you don't have to walk it alone." She didn't speak right away. When she finally did, it was quiet. "No one's ever believed in me like this before. I'm just seeing what was always there," he replied. That year changed everything for both of them. Erin enrolled in school part-time. Garrett started volunteering once a month at a transitional housing shelter. He didn't talk about it in interviews or post about it on social media. He just did it. Quietly. Respectfully. Because he finally saw what he'd missed for too long. Months passed. Erin completed her first semester with top marks. Her confidence grew. She started tutoring kids on weekends at the public library and even began submitting poetry anonymously to local journals. One was published. Garrett framed it and hung it in his study without telling her. One Friday afternoon, Erin showed up to clean as usual, but this time with a small manila envelope in her hand. She handed it to Garrett and smiled nervously. Inside was an invitation. A small celebration at the community center, her graduation from the adult learning program. "I hope you'll come," she said. He looked at the card, then at her. "I wouldn't miss it." When the day arrived, Garrett sat quietly in the third row. He watched as Erin walked across the modest stage in her navy robe and received her certificate. She didn't look nervous. She looked radiant. At the end of the ceremony, she gave a short speech. It wasn't scripted or polished, but it was raw and real. "I used to think being invisible was safer. That staying quiet meant staying afloat. But then someone saw me. Not as a burden, but as a person. And it changed everything." She paused, her voice steady. "I still have a long road ahead. But I'm not sleeping in the cold anymore. I'm not hiding anymore. And I'll never forget the day that road began to turn, all because someone cared enough to stop and ask why." The audience stood and clapped. Garrett didn't. He just sat there, still, heart full. Because for the first time in years, he realized he had built more than businesses, more than buildings. He had helped build a life. And it had changed his own in the process.